Welcome to the Space Podcast series, Stories of Change. This is an AI-narrated podcast series inspired by authentic curriculum redesign cases. In each episode, we explore how educators are rethinking teaching and learning to build stronger connections between universities, students, and society.
Hello and welcome. Today we're exploring a curriculum redesign journey within civic education that focused not only on community engagement itself, but on the careful preparation required to make that engagement meaningful, ethical, and sustainable. I'll be speaking with one of the redesign case holders about how a bachelor's level course began rethinking the relationship between students, civil society organizations, and civic learning, while deliberately resisting the pressure to move too quickly into implementation. When people talk about educational innovation, there's often an expectation that change should happen quickly and visibly. But your redesign seems to have started in a much slower and more reflective way. What prompted that approach?
Yes, that's true. From the beginning, we knew we wanted to strengthen students' engagement with real civic contexts and collaborate more meaningfully with civil society organizations. But at the same time, we were cautious. We didn't want community engagement to become something superficial or symbolic, just another activity added onto the curriculum without proper support or reflection.
So instead of immediately launching activities, the focus became understanding what meaningful civic learning actually requires.
Exactly. We realized very quickly that civic engagement isn't simply about organizing partnerships or sending students into community settings. It requires careful thinking about roles, responsibilities, learning goals, and ethical boundaries. We needed to ask fundamental questions. What does the community contribute? What are students actually learning? And how can that learning be assessed fairly and meaningfully?
And I imagine those questions became even more difficult because the redesign was happening within a context of institutional uncertainty.
Yes, definitely. At the time, broader institutional guidelines around curriculum redesign were still unclear, which meant many decisions about course structure, assessment, and workload remained provisional. That uncertainty made it difficult to move too quickly, but in some ways it also encouraged us to slow down and focus more carefully on conceptual groundwork.
So the redesign became less about immediate implementation and more about creating strong foundations first.
Precisely. There can sometimes be pressure within higher education to demonstrate visible innovation very quickly, but we felt that meaningful civic education requires preparation and reflection rather than rushed implementation. We came to see reflection not as an additional component of civic learning, but really as its core.
What do you mean by that exactly?
Students don't automatically develop civic responsibility simply by participating in community activities. They need opportunities to reflect critically on social structures, responsibility, power relationships, and their own position within society. Without that reflective dimension, engagement can easily become performative rather than genuinely educational.
And alongside those conceptual questions, there were also practical concerns to navigate as well.
Absolutely. Questions around time, workload, and assessment were very real. We also had to think carefully about how civic engagement could fit within existing program structures without overwhelming students or teaching staff. And there were important conversations about how civil society organizations should be involved within the learning process itself.
I understand the redesign team wanted community organizations to be treated as something more than occasional external contributors.
Yes, very much so. One important principle was recognizing community organizations as co-educators rather than simply guest speakers or placement providers. That changes the relationship quite significantly because it requires clearer boundaries, shared responsibilities, and more balanced collaboration between universities and communities.
And what helped the redesign continue moving forward despite all the uncertainty involved?
Several things helped. One was adopting an incremental approach, starting small and allowing space for reflection before formalizing larger changes. Dialogue with colleagues was also extremely important because curriculum alignment and shared understanding take time to build. And perhaps most importantly, we accepted that uncertainty itself could become part of the learning process rather than something that needed to be eliminated immediately.
And finally, looking back now, what do you feel is the most important lesson from this redesign journey?
Probably that responsible educational innovation sometimes begins not with immediate action, but with careful preparation. Community-engaged education requires attention not only to ideals, but also to ethics, structure, feasibility, and relationships. And sometimes uncertainty can actually create space for deeper reflection and more sustainable change.
A thoughtful reminder that in civic education, the way learning is designed can matter just as much as the content students ultimately study.
This story is based on real experiences from curriculum redesign projects run under the Erasmus Plus Space Project. More information about the cases and the Space Project can be found on the website www.community-engagement.eu.